Everyone at the Billionaire's charity gala knew the little boy standing alone near the window. His name was Ethan Blake. He was the 10-year-old son of Richard Blake, one of the most powerful CEOs in the city. But Ethan was deaf. And that night, people weren't just ignoring him. They were laughing at him. A group of wealthy guests watched as Ethan tried to communicate with another child. The other boy shook his head. Then he laughed. Why doesn't he just talk? Ethan lowered his hands. He looked down at the floor. His father was only a few dozen feet away, surrounded by investors and reporters. Richard never saw him. Then the ballroom doors opened. A quiet single dad named Daniel Carter walked inside with his 9-year-old daughter, Lily. Daniel noticed Ethan immediately. He walked toward him. He didn't speak. He simply raised his hands. And signed one word. Hello. Ethan froze. His eyes widened. Then he smiled. But nobody in that ballroom knew who Daniel really was. And nobody knew why a former Navy SEAL would know sign language. Because Daniel hadn't used those signs in years. Until that night. And by the end of the evening, he would uncover a secret that could destroy the Blake family. Richard Blake's charity gala was the biggest social event of the year. Millionaires, celebrities, investors, and politicians filled the ballroom. Richard stood beneath the enormous crystal chandelier, shaking hands and discussing his company's latest expansion. He looked successful. Confident. Untouchable. But across the room, his son Ethan stood alone. Ethan had learned to read lips. He had also learned something else. People became uncomfortable when they didn't know how to communicate with him. So he stopped trying. That night, he had brought a small sketchbook. He sat near the window and drew quietly. A boy named Jason approached him. Jason was the son of one of Richard's business partners. He pointed at Ethan's hands. Do that again. Ethan didn't understand. Jason laughed. Your weird hand language. Several children nearby laughed. Ethan closed his sketchbook. He tried to walk away. Jason stepped in front of him. Can't you hear me? The children laughed again. Ethan looked toward his father. Richard was still talking. He didn't see. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. Then Daniel arrived. Daniel Carter had no interest in billionaires. He had spent the last 3 years building a quiet life for himself and his daughter Lily. He worked as a private security consultant. He drove an ordinary SUV. He lived in a modest house. And he never talked about his military career. Lily tugged his sleeve. Dad, I'm hungry. Daniel smiled. 5 minutes. Then he noticed Ethan. Daniel's expression changed. He recognized the signs immediately. He walked toward the boy. Ethan looked up nervously. Daniel slowly raised his hands. Hello. Ethan stared. Then he signed back. You know sign language? Daniel nodded. A little. Ethan smiled. For the first time that evening, somebody had spoken to him in a language he didn't have to struggle to understand. Daniel pointed toward Ethan's sketchbook. You draw? Ethan nodded. He opened it. Daniel saw drawings of airplanes, mountains, and soldiers. Then he saw one drawing that made his expression change. A dark helicopter. A snowy mountain. And 3 figures standing beside a crashed aircraft. Daniel stared at it. Because the picture looked strangely familiar. Richard finally noticed Ethan. He walked over. Ethan, there you are. Ethan looked at him. Richard smiled awkwardly. I'm sorry, buddy. Daddy was busy. Ethan signed something. Richard didn't understand. His smile disappeared. Can we not do this right now? Daniel looked at Richard. He didn't say anything. But Ethan immediately understood the change in his father's voice. He closed his sketchbook. Richard noticed Daniel. Who are you? Daniel Carter. Richard looked at him suspiciously. You know my son? Not until tonight. Richard looked at Ethan. Then at Daniel. Thank you for helping him. Daniel nodded. No problem. Richard walked away. Ethan watched him leave. Then he signed to Daniel. He doesn't understand me. Daniel looked at the boy. Then signed. Maybe he doesn't know how yet. Later that night, Ethan disappeared. Richard panicked. Security searched the ballroom. Daniel noticed something nobody else did. A side door was open. He followed a trail of muddy footprints. They led toward the service corridor. Daniel moved quickly. His old instincts returned. He heard a faint sound. Someone was crying. He found Ethan hiding behind a storage room. Daniel crouched beside him. Ethan was shaking. Daniel signed. Are you hurt? Ethan shook his head. Then he pointed toward the parking area. He signed. Man. Daniel looked outside. A black SUV was leaving. Daniel memorized the license plate. Then Ethan showed him something. A small silver key. Daniel recognized the symbol engraved on it. It was the same symbol he had seen years ago during his final military operation. His heart stopped. That symbol was supposed to have disappeared with the past. Richard demanded an explanation. Why did you follow my son? Daniel remained calm. He was frightened. Richard looked at the key in Ethan's hand. Where did he get that? Ethan pointed toward the parking lot. Richard immediately called security. But Daniel stopped him. Don't. Richard stared. Why? Because if the person who left that car wanted Ethan dead, your security team searching randomly won't help. Richard's face went pale. What are you talking about? Daniel finally revealed part of the truth. I used to serve in the Navy. Richard nodded. That's not exactly a secret. Daniel looked at him. I wasn't just Navy. Silence. I was a SEAL. Richard's expression changed. Daniel continued. I spent years learning how to recognize patterns most people never notice. He held up the key. And this symbol belongs to someone I thought was dead. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He searched through old memories. 8 years earlier, his SEAL unit had been sent to rescue an American scientist trapped in a remote mountain facility. The mission went wrong. An aircraft crashed. 3 men disappeared. One of them was believed to be dead. His name was Victor Hale. Victor had been connected to Richard Blake's company. Daniel suddenly realized something. Ethan's drawing. The helicopter. The mountains. The 3 figures. It wasn't imagination. Ethan had drawn something he had seen. Daniel returned to Richard's house. Ethan needs to tell us something. Richard looked confused. Ethan doesn't hear. I know. He can't explain what he saw. Daniel shook his head. He can. Richard looked at him. He just needs someone willing to listen. Daniel sat beside Ethan. He placed a blank piece of paper on the table. Then he signed. Show me. Ethan began drawing. First, a black SUV. Then a tall man. Then a building. Then a strange symbol. Daniel's breathing became shallow. He recognized the building. It was one of Richard Blake's private research facilities. Richard immediately stood. That's impossible. Daniel looked at him. Why? That facility hasn't been used in years. Daniel pointed at Ethan's drawing. Your son thinks someone is using it. Richard stared at the picture. Then Ethan signed something. Daniel translated. He was there before. Richard's face turned pale. When? Ethan pointed toward his own memory. Then he signed. Mom. Silence filled the room. Richard's wife had died 3 years earlier. At least, that was what everyone believed. Richard's wife, Sarah, had supposedly died in a car accident. But Daniel noticed something strange. Ethan wasn't signing that his mother was dead. He was signing she wasn't alone. Richard became angry. My wife died. Daniel didn't argue. Then why is your son drawing her inside that facility? Richard stared at Ethan. For the first time, he looked genuinely afraid. They checked old security records. A hidden camera had been activated inside the abandoned facility 2 months earlier. Someone had entered. And the footage showed a woman. Richard froze. It was Sarah. Alive. Richard rushed to the facility. Daniel went with him. They discovered evidence that Sarah had been investigating financial fraud inside Richard's company. Someone had been stealing millions. Sarah had found the evidence. She had tried to expose it. But before she could, someone had staged the accident. She survived. She disappeared to protect Ethan. But now she had returned because she knew the truth was about to be discovered. The person behind everything was Richard's own chief financial officer, Marcus Reed. Marcus had manipulated company accounts for years. He had also used Richard's name to cover his crimes. And now he wanted Ethan's drawings destroyed. Because Ethan had accidentally seen him. Daniel realized the gala incident had been intentional. Marcus had used the children to isolate Ethan. He wanted to frighten him into revealing where Sarah had hidden the evidence. Daniel confronted Marcus. Marcus smiled. You should have stayed out of this. Daniel didn't move. I've heard that before. Marcus signaled 2 men. They attacked. Daniel's military training took over. He disarmed one. Blocked the second. And forced Marcus to the ground. But Marcus escaped through a hidden exit. Daniel chased him. Marcus reached the facility. Inside was Sarah. And Ethan. Marcus had taken them both. Daniel entered the building alone. He knew there was no room for mistakes. He found Ethan first. The boy was terrified. Daniel raised his hands. I'm here. Ethan immediately ran toward him. Daniel freed him. Then they heard Sarah. She was trapped in another room. Marcus appeared with a weapon. You ruined everything. Daniel stood between him and Ethan. Marcus threatened him. Daniel didn't move. He simply looked at Ethan and signed. Stay behind me. Marcus didn't understand the signs. That was his mistake. Daniel had already called for help. Seconds later, police stormed the building. Marcus was arrested. Sarah was finally safe. And Richard arrived moments later. He saw Ethan. His son ran toward him. Richard dropped to his knees. For the first time, he didn't try to speak. He raised his hands. Slowly. Awkwardly. And signed. I'm sorry. Ethan stared at him. Then he hugged his father. Weeks later, Richard's company survived. Marcus went to trial. Sarah began rebuilding her life. But something had changed most of all. Richard started learning sign language. Not because his son was deaf. Because his son deserved to be heard. Daniel continued living quietly. He never accepted Richard's offer to become head of security. Instead, he kept working and raising Lily. One afternoon, Ethan visited Daniel. He handed him a drawing. Daniel looked at it. It showed 4 people. Ethan. Richard. Daniel. And Lily. Above them was a single word written in large letters. Family. Daniel smiled. You sure about that? Ethan nodded. Then he signed. You listen to me. Daniel looked at him. Everyone deserves someone who listens. Months later, Richard organized a charity event for deaf children. This time Ethan wasn't standing alone. He walked onto the stage. Hundreds of people watched. Richard stood proudly in the front row. Sarah stood beside him. Daniel and Lily sat nearby. Ethan raised his hands. He signed. People think being different makes you weak. He paused. But sometimes being different teaches you to see what everyone else misses. The audience became silent. Ethan looked toward Daniel. Then he smiled. He raised his hands again. The first sign Daniel had ever given him. Hello. Daniel smiled. And signed back. Hello, Ethan. The boy who had once been mocked for being different was now standing in front of hundreds of people. Not hiding. Not ashamed. Not alone. And the single dad who had simply signed one word that night had unknowingly changed an entire family's life. Because sometimes, the smallest gesture can become the biggest rescue of all. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss our next emotional story. And don't forget to tell us in the comments, where are you watching from?